The moment he entered the alley, my senses sharpened. The scent of spilled blood hit me like a hammer. A single drop on the pavement. A smear across the thug's face. His pulse quickened. My gaze flicked to the one who had suffered, a frail human, broken and bleeding. The victim twitched on the ground, barely holding on to consciousness. A familiar sight. The weak, the helpless, and the predators who fed on them. I should not interfere. I had no reason to. Yet my body moved, as it always had. To eradicate the wicked. That's enough, villains. My voice echoed through the alley, cold as the void between stars. The thugs froze. They felt it too, the weight of something beyond their understanding. A presence born of war. A predator in human skin. The victim, a boy, gasped, his wide eyes locking onto me. There was something strange in those eyes, not just shock, recognition. Even though I had stopped them, saving him from the knife's edge, he knew me. Blood. Red. Crimson. A droplet struck the cobblestone, then another. Drip. 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 The blood pooled, a miniature puddle forming from the thug's crushed skull. And then, the scent deepened. Red mist. It rose from the warm blood, curling through the air, painting the world in crimson. My body thirsted. My skin dried, parched as a desert beneath a merciless sun. A thirst for red. Shame. No shame. Honor. No honor. Justice, for the weak. For the feeble. For the blood that calls to me. The world was burning. For weeks, we had fought tooth and nail against the endless tide of greenskins. The planet was lost, but Command refused to admit it. We, the last 100 guardsmen of the 22nd Solstar Regiment, were left behind to die in a war we had already lost. The Imperial tanks that once rumbled across the battlefield now lay in ruins, their metal husks torn apart by crude but brutally effective Orc weaponry. The trenches we dug had long since been overrun, the bunkers collapsed, our officers dead. We were running out of everything, ammo, men, even the will to fight. The Orcs never tired, never wavered, and every charge of theirs brought them closer to wiping us out completely. Then, the sky split open. A flash of gold and crimson descended like a comet, followed by another, then another. At first, we thought it was the Emperor himself, but no, this was something else. The Angels of Death had come. Astartes. It was rare, almost unheard of, for space marines to grace our battlefield. We had always heard of them in stories, godlike warriors who waged war in the Emperor's name, being so far above us that even seeing one was a blessing. And yet, here they were, the Blood Angels. Their power armor was a radiant crimson, not dulled by dirt or battle, but shining like the armor of warriors in ancient scripture. Their helmets bore the snarling visages of death, sculpted to strike fear into their enemies. The golden teardrop sigil of their legion gleamed against their chestplates, and in their hands, they carried the instruments of annihilation, bolters, chainswords, and cruel weapons I had never seen before. For the first time in weeks, we felt hope. I felt it swelling in my chest as I dropped to my knees, overwhelmed by relief. We are saved. The Astartes moved like avenging angels, streaking through the battlefield at speeds no human could match. They didn't just fight the Orcs, they slaughtered them. The Greenskins, so brutal and relentless against us, were nothing more than cattle before the wrath of these warriors. One leaped onto a warboss, chainsword screaming as it carved through thick green muscle, splitting the beast in half in a spray of gore. Another slammed an Orc's skull against the ruins of a tank, reducing it to pulp with his bare hands. They fought with a fury I had never seen before, switching tactics mid-strike, abandoning their weapons to tear apart their enemies with claws, teeth, even their bare fists. They were berserkers wrapped in the guise of angels, a terrifying force of nature. Within minutes, the battlefield was cleared. The Orcs, who had overwhelmed us for weeks, were gone, their bodies torn and broken. I wept. I could barely stand as I approached them, the weight of exhaustion and relief making my knees weak. I fell before the closest Astartes, my voice trembling with gratitude. My lord, thank you. I am yours to command. If you ask it, I will serve you until my dying breath. The Astartes did not reply. Instead, one leapt, so fast I barely saw it, landing on the guardsman beside me. A flash of crimson, the wet crunch of bone. I gasped as my comrade screamed, his voice breaking into a wet gurgle. A fine mist of blood sprayed across my face. I stumbled back in horror. Before I could react, something hit me, hard. My body lifted off the ground, my vision spinning. I flew through the air, weightless for a moment, before crashing to the dirt. My body felt wrong. I couldn't breathe. I tried to move, but nothing responded. Then I saw it. My body lay several feet away, headless. Realization dawned, but there was no pain, only cold, creeping terror. I tried to scream, but I had no lungs. My mouth opened and closed like a fish dragged from water. My mind still functioned, but for how long? As my vision dimmed, the last thing I saw was the Blood Angels. Their armor, once radiant, was now drenched in fresh crimson. They had saved us. And then they killed us. The last thing I thought before darkness took me was the same thing my comrades must have thought as they died. I thought we were saved, the fight was over before it began. The thugs never had a chance. One lay crumpled against the alley wall, his skull caved in, eyes frozen in terror. Another was sprawled across the cobblestone, a twisted mess of shattered limbs, his final breath stolen before he could even scream. The last, the one who had bled the most, still twitched. I towered over him, my shadow swallowing his broken body. His chest rose and fell in weak, ragged gasps, each breath a futile attempt to hold on to life. But the blood had already abandoned him. It pooled beneath him, warm and glistening in the dim light. And I was on my knees before I even realized it. The scent wrapped around me, a haze, a fog, a whisper at the edge of my mind. It was thick, intoxicating, alive. I must not. But the thirst. My hands dug into the cobblestone as my lips met the wound. The man whimpered. His body convulsed. But his fear was nothing. His pain was nothing. All that mattered was the rush. The first taste was fire, pure, searing. My throat burned, my body shuddered, and then, bliss. The dryness, the hunger, the aching void inside me, it was gone. Strength flooded my limbs, my vision sharpened, the world became clearer than it had ever been. I drank, and drank, until he stopped twitching, until his body went still, until he was nothing but an empty husk in my grasp. I exhaled slowly, the taste still rich on my tongue. A part of me whispered in horror at what I had done. The rest of me, it only wanted more. Everything went black. And then, pain. A sharp sting in my chest, a spear of light piercing through the void. My eyes snapped open. I was standing in the alley again. The thugs still breathed, the victims still gasped. And I was still hungry, but something had changed. At the entrance of the alley, standing like an unshakable pillar of justice, was him. A knight in white and red, his brilliant sword resting at his side, a blade that reeked of divinity. His blue eyes, impossibly bright, locked onto me with unwavering judgment. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt small. He knows what I am. He knows what I have done. And Subaru, the boy, stood beside him. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't shocked. He simply stared at me with a knowing gaze. And then he spoke. Finally, this loop was not meaningless. The first time, I died screaming. I didn't even have time to register what had happened before the darkness took me. One moment, I was on the ground, beaten and bleeding, my body barely holding together. The next, he was there. A golden-haired warrior draped in black, his presence swallowing the alley whole. I thought I was saved. Then I saw his face, the hunger in his eyes. The way his breath hitched at the scent of blood. How his lips curled back, not in rage, not in anger, but in something far worse. Longing. He moved too fast for me to react. Teeth, pain, black. And then, the second time, I tried to run. I barely got 2 steps before my ribs cracked under an invisible force. I suffocated in my own blood before I even hit the ground. The third time, I tried to talk to him. Wait, stop. You don't have to do this. His head tilted, as if considering my words. For a moment, I thought I had reached him. Then he exhaled sharply. You smell of blood. The world twisted, my skull cracked against stone. Black again. The fourth time, I tried to fight back. It was a joke. A bad one. I had nothing. He had everything. He didn't even use his hands that time. A whisper of force and my bones shattered like glass. Black. The fifth time, I tried to stall. It didn't matter. He was inevitable. The 10th time, I tried warning the thugs. They laughed at me. Then they screamed. The 20th time, I didn't move. I let the knife take me before he could. A quicker death. The 50th time, I begged. It didn't work. But it took him longer to kill me. The 100th time, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just killing me. He was remembering. His movements changed. Became sharper, more efficient. He was adapting. It was getting harder to find openings. He was learning from my deaths. The 150th time, I knew I needed something else. Someone else. If I couldn't stop him. If I couldn't run. Then I had to find something stronger. The 200th time, I finally got the timing right. I screamed, loud enough for the streets to hear. Help. A knight. A knight. Help me. It was stupid. Desperate. But it worked. A flash of red and white. A sword that shone like a star. And then, for the first time in 200 deaths, the Blood Angel stopped. Not because of me, but because Reinhard van Estrie had arrived. And as the strongest knight in the kingdom raised his sword, I let out a ragged breath. Finally, this loop was not meaningless.